Hello everyone, welcome to another installment of Shower Thoughts, the budget commander series that proves Magic isn't pay to win. In this week's video, I'm going over my pick for the 5 commanders from March of the Machine Aftermath that are easy to build on a budget while still being powerful, along with some key cards and why you should include them. In my previous videos, I usually do 10 commanders, but given the small size of the set, I'm sticking with 5 here. They aren't listed in any particular order, and if you want to read the accompanying article over at the Commander's Herald, I'll have that linked down in the video description below. And don't forget to check out my Patreon, which is live, linked in the video description below. Signing up gives you access to videos a day early, Discord flair, your name in the credits, and you also get a personal deck tune-up. To keep supporting the channel for free, just hit that like button. So without further ado, let's get into it. First up is Taivar the Bellicose. Mana dorks aren't known for their ability to end games of Commander. A majority of them are usually 1 or 2 mana, and when you draw them early, you love it. When you top deck them on turn 10, you curse the magic gods. But what if we could take these weak creatures and turn them into absolute units? Thankfully, Taivar will help us do just that. Unlike Raga Draga, Gorgut's boss, Taivar will make sure to keep our dorks nice and buff even after he's gone. And don't forget, there are other types of mana abilities aside from just tapping creatures. Cards such as Lord of the Forsaken have mana abilities that are easy to activate on each turn. Some key cards to include would be Lord of the Forsaken. As I just mentioned, they have a mana ability that you can activate during each player's turn, giving you the ability to take the 6/6 flying Trample Demon into an 11/11 by your next turn. Next is Awakening. While I would have loved to include Seedborn Muse or Quest for Renewal, I don't consider them to be budget cards anymore. Just be careful when you decide to play this though, since the effect is for all players and not just you. Next is Staff of Domination. This card can go infinite with a ham sandwich, and its price has stayed down since the reprint. It's a great way to untap mana dorks or just win the game by getting infinite life and drawing your entire library. Next is Kami of Whispered Hopes. This newly released Hardened Scales on a creature is one of the best includes in this deck. Not only will it put one additional +1/+1 counter on creatures you control, it'll continually tap for more mana as you use it. And then finally is Incubation Druid. Taivar cares about how much mana was created from the mana ability, and once this creature gets a single +1/+1 counter, it'll start tapping for 3 mana instead of just 1, letting you grow this dork into a massive threat in only a few turns. Next up is Samit, Vizier of Noctamen. The first thing I thought when looking at Samit was, can I build Gruul Ninjas? Those dreams were very quickly dashed after a brief Scryfall search. There are only 3 creatures in Gruul colors with ninjutsu, all of them being mono green, which does make me pretty sad. But that's okay. We must move on from that amazing but very short-lived dream and figure out how to build this commander. Thankfully, Samit doesn't specify non-token creatures, which means we can abuse cards that put hasty tokens into play. If I were personally building this commander, I'd use it as a home for a hidden Valduk Keeper of Flame deck, since green can tutor creatures with ease, and Valduk makes tokens with trample and haste. However, since we are on a budget, I would stick to a trample and haste theme. Some key cards to include would be Brawn. This is an inexpensive way to give your creatures trample. I would like to suggest Anger, but its price tag is a bit too much for me to consider it budget. Life of the Party is next. It has a lot of keywords we care about, and can get massive with the right board state. Sarok and Goreclaw is next. It feels like this card was made for this deck. It not only gives creatures trample, but haste, and then also puts counters on them. Haunted Cloak is the next card. This is an inexpensive way to repeatedly give creatures we play haste and trample for a turn. And finally, Footfall Crater. It's the same reason as Haunted Cloak. This is essentially 1 mana to give a creature trample and haste until end of turn. Next up is Cura, Sovereign of the Deep. Finally, we have a dedicated sea creature commander in Simic colors. Now, I know we've had Arixmethes before, and we've had Runo Sturmkirk for Dimir, and Slyn Voda for Mono Blue, but I'm so happy we finally got one in the Simic colors. Cura is exactly what I wanted to see in a sea creature commander. Her ability to give your creatures pseudo cascade is such great value in the command zone, but she's not overly powerful since you have to cast the card from your hand. And unlike normal tribal decks, I don't think we need a massive amount of creatures. I would personally go with about 10 or 15 high mana value sea creatures and focus on the ability to double up on big spells. Quick rules note, Cura's ability doesn't follow timing restrictions. Some key cards to include would be Thrix the Sudden Storm. This will prevent our big spells from being countered, and reduces the cost of expensive spells. Also, my friend hates this card, so I love including it in decks when possible. Pearl-Link Ancient is next. Not only does this beauty have flash, so we can play it at the end of someone's turn, or in response to a spell to try to find an answer, but it also has a way of returning to our hand so we can cast it again. Just make sure you're ramping enough. Next is Stormtide Leviathan. This turns off opponents' creatures and is a cute combo with Pearl-like Ancient since it makes all of our lands into islands. Next is Nimbus Swimmer. Being able to decide how much mana you want to put into a spell with Cura seems invaluable. If you really need an answer, you can dump as much mana as possible into this, or you can set up the top of your library with a Brainstorm and simply cast it for the exact amount you need. And finally, we do have a Rixmithy Slumbering Isle. We need ramp. This is ramp. It's on theme. Not much else to say about this card. Next on our list is Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin. Name a planeswalker who's lost their spark more often than poor Ob Nixilis. Go ahead, I'll wait. Actually, if you know the answer, leave a comment down below. Thankfully, that isn't going to stop this commander from being an absolute house in the format. This card feels like a Prosper Tomebound that won't get you hated off the table right away. And having to only deal 1 damage to each opponent shouldn't be that difficult. We just got a reprint of Impact Tremors, which will definitely help, and I would lean into the burn aspect of this commander to win games. One last note, while it might not be considered budget, All Will Be One and Ob Nixilis do go infinite, so be on the lookout for that. Some key cards to include would be Mana Barbs. Since our commander doesn't specify that we have to deal the damage, this card will make sure we get multiple triggers every turn. Also, our opponent's fetch lands will trigger Ob Nixilis. Something to keep in mind. Next is Fate Unraveler. People will be drawing cards, so let's get some damage from it. Next up is Underworld Dreams. Same reason as Fate Unraveler, nothing else to say here. Next is Cryptolith Fragment. This is a mana rock that will trigger our commander, so it's an easy include in the deck. And finally, we have Impact Tremors. We will be playing creatures, and that will trigger Ob Nixilis. Pretty easy. Last on our list is Calyx Guided by Fate. White-green X enchantments is an archetype we've seen numerous times over the years, from Sith's Harvest Hand to Tuvasa the Sunlit. This is only the second time Constellation has appeared on a legendary creature, and it's the first legendary enchantment creature with this ability. Calyx cares about 2 things, having enchantments enter the battlefield, and smacking face with enchanted creatures. While you might be tempted to build them as Voltron, I think you're better off building a go-wide deck. While you are more susceptible to board wipes, there are usually fewer of those in games, and you'll have a better chance of hitting someone with a creature to activate their second ability. Plus, there are a number of enchantments that make tokens or draw cards when they enter the battlefield, which are excellent copy targets. Also, make sure to include curses in this deck, since you can give out multiple copies of them. And then finally, some key cards to include. First up is Cartouche of Solidarity. It's a cheap enchantment that makes a body when it enters the battlefield, and it's a great copy target. Next is Fist of Ironwood. Same reason as the card above, but this makes 2 tokens instead of 1. Next is Kenrith's Transformation. While I'd love to have been able to include Song of the Dryads on this list, it's just too expensive right now. But being able to turn off problematic creatures over and over again is such great value I couldn't pass it up. Darksteel Mutation also works in this deck. Next is Sigil of the Empty Throne. You want tokens when you cast enchantments, and this will do that for us. Plus, the Angel tokens are great targets for auras given the built-in evasion. And then finally, Unquestioned Authority. This aura will make sure you get in for damage with any creature enchanted by this aura. It's also great to give to Calyx if you need to finish someone off with commander damage. And with that, thanks for watching. A special shout out to my patrons shown on screen here. And again, if you'd like to join them in supporting the channel, I have a link to my Patreon in the video description below. Otherwise, just give this video a like if you liked it, dislike if you didn't. Also, don't forget to check out my article over at the Commander's Herald, linked in the video description below. This has been Ben with Bathroom Brews MTG. And remember, always wash your hands.